Hello and welcome to another edition of Trading News and Views. This is Cornerstone J316 with this week's analysis September 18th through September 22nd. This video will recap last week's major events. Really have two parts to go over. What's going to be happening this upcoming week. Focus on the countdown to the FOMC and fundamental trends. Also take a look at the commitment of trader sentiment. And lastly, technical levels with regards to institutional activity. Recapping last week's major events, part one really on Wednesday that had an effect on the Australian dollar. Employment information came out. We're expecting 17,500. However, that number came in at much higher than expected at 54,200. So certainly this was a nice bullish number. I know for myself when I saw that information came out, I thought this would be a nice catalyst for some Aussie trades to the upside. However, the unemployment rate still stayed the same at 5.6%. So certainly that muted anything to the upside with regards to the Australian dollar. Then on Thursday we had a couple central banks that came out with their rate statements. Really nothing out of the ordinary. It was expected that they would both keep their rates the same, which is in fact what happened. Then on Friday, probably the most significant impact was regards to the British pound and one of the policymakers and its hawkish comments from the Bank of England that came out. I'll cover that in the next slide. Plus we had a couple reports a little bit later on with regards to the US dollar. Both those reports missing expectation. Part two on recapping last week's major events. Really wanted to highlight the impact with regards to the British pound. One of its policymakers from the Bank of England. Generally, they are dovish overall, so that's kind of their sentiment. So for them to make the remarks may support interest rates in the future, really cause the British pound some significant upside. Probably the one that had the greatest opportunity was the British pound, Japanese yen. For those that were able to participate in that, winner winner chicken dinner. However, if you did not catch that trade, don't worry, there's always another bus. And then I know I've gotten a few emails from a few traders and viewers just kind of wanting maybe to show some chart examples maybe when news breaks and the impact it has. So with regards to the British pound and US dollar, just because of the news for the British pound and the US dollar, there were a couple reports that came out that missed. So certainly there was a lot of energy in these two candles right here, and then kind of things kind of paused for a few hours. When the report came out, I know for myself with the British pound and USD, with those two reports from the US dollar that affected the US dollar, I was expecting more upside, or at least it was setting up that way. However, that is not what happened, and so certainly it had the opposite effect. Not a tremendous amount, but still enough to say, you know what, I'm just not going to take a position. Just one of these things I like to have technical levels and fundamentals and sentiment all in sync, because the way I typically do my trading is I will pyramid or stack my positions. So however, things have to be set up correctly. So, and even was thinking, well, you know what, the news came out and there was a lot of energy to the upside, maybe this would pull back. So again, on the other hand, or another aspect that I was looking at was to see that this candle, this is the those two U.S. reports that came out, looking to see if this level of support was going to break, which it did not. Pretty much the rest of the day it just kind of chopped around. So this green candle that you see right here actually has to do with the Sunday session, as we have gapped down with regards to the British pound. However, we did close that gap. So something to keep in mind with regards to the trend. Both the US dollar and the Canadian dollar, their central banks are now in this mode of starting to raise rates. So the question is, who is going to be next? Is it the Bank of England? So certainly with these comments that was made, that could give some indication for things down the road. Taking a look at this upcoming week, on Monday we have monetary policy minutes. Just going to be interesting to see the verbiage that comes out, the tone that comes out, and to see how the institutionals players react to that. Then on Tuesday, we've got some building permits with regards to the U.S. dollar. Over the coming weeks and months, with the storms that we had here in the U.S. with regards to Harvey and Irma, in my opinion, will start to have an impact. So in the coming months, would expect to see this number to rise. Then on Wednesday, a fairly active day with several reports. Probably the one that's highlighted will be the FOMC statement. Federal fund rates, they are expected to keep things right where they're at. I'll kind of get into the next slide. Kind of for those that are curious sentiment wise, and a little bit later on, we have monetary policy statement and a policy rate that is expected to stay right where they're at. So I know here in the U.S., actually this press conference follows on a Thursday morning. So again, it's just going to be interesting to see the comments that come out. And then a little bit later on in the trading session, we have unemployment information that comes out. It's interesting, this 300,000, that's what they were expecting last week. However, that number came in at 284,000. So it's going to be interesting to see if that number comes in at the same. If not, could see some nice opportunities with the US dollar. Then on Friday, we've got a couple reports that affect the Canadian dollar. Keep in mind, on Friday we have the elections taking place in New Zealand, or that will affect the New Zealand dollar. Certainly, just want to be mindful that things in the beginning, as kind of the day progresses, as the election results start to come in, that sentiment might change. Let's take a look at the countdown to the FOMC. One of the sentiment tools that I know a lot of traders and myself like to refer to from time to time is what's called the Fed Watch tool from the CME. Certainly you can Google. This is a free tool that you can look at. If you just Google CME and then just type in their search FedWatch tool, this will actually bring it up. You can pretty much look at any month that the FOMC is going to have a rate decision, and you can kind of see the consensus. So in this particular case, they are expecting just over 98% for the FOMC to keep rates right where they're at. I'm not sure where they're getting this 1.4% that is expecting a reduction in the rates, but again, they are expecting rates to stay right where they're at. Let's take a look at the fundamental trends. And as far as this past week, not a whole lot of gyration. Pretty much the report kind of went up and down. Maybe one day it was a bullish report, then the next day it was a bearish report. And so certainly this past week there was really nothing out of the ordinary. And looking at the trends for the last couple of months, we start to see that things have started to tick upwards. So certainly it is not surprising to see the US dollar and the Canadian dollar, where their central banks have been raising rates. So again, the question is the Bank of England next? Time will tell over the next couple months. Looking at the commitment of traders sentiment, this is a report that comes out weekly. Keep in mind it is delayed data. I am just concerned with the non-commercials. These are the large institutions that have a tendency to drive prices in a certain direction. So, and a lot of times you will see the currency kind of mirror what the commitment of traders. There are several different ways to look at this report. This is meant to look at things in a 50,000 foot view. It's not meant to trade intraday or anything like that. It is meant to look at more of a larger perspective. So, thing I'm always looking for is a possible change in the trend. In this particular case, with the Aussie dollar, last couple weeks, nothing too significant to the downside. Just seems like participants are cooling their efforts to add positions to the upside. So this could be the start of a trend to the downside. Just time will tell. What I also thought was interesting is that the Bank of England came out with its comments that were rather hawkish. However, you look at the last 4 weeks, the sentiment has been rather bearish. So even from a large institutional point of view, they were not really expecting anything to the upside. Now you might say, well, corner this particular week is bullish. This just is a coincidence. This actually has to do with information prior to what the Bank of England with its one policymaker. So certainly we could start to see a change in sentiment with regards to the larger players. Just time will tell. Looking at the major levels, this is where I feel institutional activity has taken place. You can certainly put these on your chart. Once price reaches that level, I do have some strategies to where I take counter trend or sometimes as support or resistance starts to build in. This just adds to the confluence. If you do have any questions or comments, certainly shoot me an email at cornerstonej316 at gmail.com. Have a great trading week, everyone.